It all began on a warm evening in late spring when Sarah Thompson was hired as the new babysitter for the Miller family. Sarah was 22, fresh out of college, with dreams of becoming a teacher. She had been picking up babysitting jobs here and there to make some money while she looked for a full-time position. The Millers had 2 kids, 8-year-old Emily and 5-year-old Noah, both sweet, full of energy, and just a little mischievous. Sarah was welcomed into their home by Lisa Miller, the mother. Lisa was a sharp, confident woman who worked long hours as a marketing executive. Her husband, Daniel Miller, was quieter, more reserved, and ran his own contracting business. Sarah had met Lisa during the initial interview, and she came away with the impression that Lisa liked everything to run on schedule. Lisa was warm but brisk, the type of woman who checked her watch twice while waiting for a pot of water to boil. That evening, when Sarah arrived for her first shift, she found Daniel at home getting the kids ready for bed while Lisa finished some last-minute packing for a business trip. Lisa explained that she'd be gone for 3 days, and Daniel would be busy with work, so Sarah's help would be much needed. Sarah nodded, eager to make a good impression. The first night was simple enough. Sarah read bedtime stories to Emily and Noah, tucked them in, and afterward found herself sitting at the kitchen table sipping tea. Daniel walked in, looking tired but grateful. "Thanks for doing this," he said with a faint smile. "Lisa is always worried about schedules and routines, but you seem to have things under control." Sarah smiled back. "The kids are sweet. They make it easy." From there, the conversations began. Small, harmless chats that seemed natural. Sarah learned that Daniel was once a musician before he settled into his contracting business. He had a guitar tucked away in the living room, dusty and neglected. Sarah, who had played piano in high school, asked if he ever played anymore. He chuckled, saying he was too busy and too tired these days. Over the next few days, Sarah came by after school hours to watch Emily and Noah. Daniel often worked late but occasionally arrived home while Sarah was still there. Sometimes they would chat in the kitchen while Sarah waited for her ride home. There was something about Daniel. His calmness, the way he listened, that caught Sarah's attention. It wasn't romantic, not at first. It was more like 2 people finding comfort in unexpected company. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, Sarah found Daniel sitting with the old guitar in his lap. The notes he strummed were shaky, unpolished, but his face softened as though he were remembering a version of himself he hadn't seen in years. She sat down quietly, listening. When he stopped, embarrassed, she clapped gently. "You're really good," she said. He shook his head. "Not anymore. But thank you." That moment lingered between them. Sarah wasn't blind to it. She felt the weight of something unspoken, something dangerous if allowed to grow. Daniel seemed aware of it too because he quickly stood and put the guitar back into its case, making small talk to brush away the silence. As the days turned into weeks, Sarah noticed subtle things. The Millers' marriage seemed strained. Lisa was always in a rush, always tired, always snapping at Daniel about one thing or another. Sarah often caught Daniel sighing quietly, as if swallowing words he didn't dare speak aloud. Still, Sarah told herself it wasn't her place to notice. She was just the babysitter. Then came the night of the storm. Lisa was out of town again, and Daniel had been delayed at work. By the time he came home, the rain was lashing against the windows, and thunder rolled across the sky. Sarah had just managed to calm Noah, who hated storms, and had settled him in bed with Emily. She was soaked from running outside to bring in toys from the yard. Daniel walked in, dripping wet himself, and found her standing in the kitchen toweling her hair with a dishcloth. "You didn't have to do that," he said, taking the towel from her. Their hands brushed, and Sarah felt her heart jolt in her chest. "It's fine," she replied softly. "I didn't want their toys to get ruined." For a moment they just stood there listening to the storm. The house felt smaller, the air thicker. Daniel finally sighed. "You're good with them," he said quietly. "Sometimes I feel like I'm just fumbling around, trying not to mess everything up." Sarah looked at him, seeing the tired lines on his face. "You're doing better than you think." Their eyes lingered a second too long, and Sarah knew she had to pull back. She excused herself, saying she should head home, even though the storm outside was still raging. Daniel offered to drive her, but she shook her head, saying her ride was already on the way. That night, lying in bed, Sarah told herself she had to be careful. Whatever was growing between them had no place in reality. He was married. She was their babysitter. She couldn't cross that line. And yet, the more time passed, the harder it became to ignore. Daniel began opening up more, sharing pieces of his life. Stories about his childhood, his dreams that had been left behind, his frustrations with how life had turned out. Sarah listened, and in turn she shared her fears about the future, her struggles to find her footing after college. It wasn't love, not really. It was a fragile connection, a thread spun from loneliness and understanding. One evening, Lisa came home earlier than expected. She walked in to find Sarah and Daniel sitting at the table, laughing over a story from Sarah's college days. Lisa's smile was polite but tight. She thanked Sarah for her help and told her she could head home. The moment Sarah left, she felt a chill. Something about Lisa's tone had shifted. Over the next few weeks, Sarah noticed Lisa becoming more distant. Her conversations with Daniel clipped and sharp. Sarah worried she had somehow made things worse just by being there. She considered quitting, but Emily and Noah had grown attached to her, and the thought of leaving them behind tugged at her heart. One afternoon when Sarah arrived, Daniel wasn't home yet. Lisa was in the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of wine. She gave Sarah a long look before saying, "You're good with the kids. They adore you. But just remember your place here." The words stung, but Sarah forced a smile. "Of course, Mrs. Miller. I'd never forget that." After that, Sarah kept her distance. She no longer lingered for conversations with Daniel. She kept everything professional, polite, careful. The connection they had shared began to fade, not because it wasn't real, but because it couldn't be allowed. Months later, Sarah found a full-time teaching position at an elementary school in another town. On her last day with the Millers, Emily clung to her, begging her not to leave, while Noah cried quietly. Sarah reassured them she'd visit, though she knew it wouldn't be the same. When she finally walked out the front door, Daniel followed her. He didn't say much, just a quiet thank you for everything. Their eyes met one last time, both of them knowing all the words that would never be spoken. Sarah smiled, whispered "take care," and left. Years later, Sarah would sometimes think back on that chapter of her life. Not with regret, but with a bittersweet ache. She had learned something important, that sometimes the strongest connections are the ones that never cross the line, the ones that exist in silence and restraint. The babysitter and the husband had shared something real, something fleeting, but in the end, it was only a passing chapter in both their lives. And that was enough.